Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to our penultimate session before lunch. You've all enjoyed this morning so far? It has flown by, hasn't it? It does go very quick, get these sessions, but I'm delighted to welcome a good friend of the Innovators Network. And if any of you have followed Cris on LinkedIn or any of the social media he shares, he's a big sharer of all things sort of corporate innovation, and he's worked with the housing sector for a long time now, so he really does get what some of the challenges are that this housing sector is actually going to go through. So, well, the next 30 minutes, I think he's going to give you some really good insight to how you can get from now to next, and how you can understand which methodologies to actually use to help your organization go from brittleness to breakthrough. So please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Cris Beswick.
Cheers, mate. Cheers. Good afternoon. Well, the first thing for me is the panel that you've just had is the perfect segue for everything that I'm going to talk to you about. So that couldn't have gone any better from my point of view in terms of what I want to share with you. From brittleness to breakthrough was a title that I came up with. I wrote an article called The Brittleness Paradox. And I think if you want to read it, you can find it on the Digital Housing website. And the brittleness paradox is sort of a management or an academic term to describe organizations that are so stretched, that are running at 100%. And maybe some of you guys will recognize that and say, well, Cris, we're not even at 100%, we're at 110%. We're so stretched operationally. And the brittleness paradox describes that condition that our organizations are in, where we have no capacity and no flexibility or no adaptability to do anything different than run the business today. So I'm going to share with you today a little bit of a different view on innovation. Obviously, the core theme of everything that you've heard over the past few days. I'm going to share a little bit of a different view on innovation, because we've heard lots about tech and systems and processes and AI and data. And at the heart of everything that you do is people. At the heart of everything that your customers are people. The people in your organizations are obviously people. And we need, I think, to talk more about the people in our organizations, how we shape the kind of culture that our organizations need to be able to drive innovation and to be able to deliver innovative solutions for our customers. So I'm sort of best known for this book, and I'm going to share some of the things that we wrote about in the book. If there's any CEOs or execs listening or sat here today who are really struggling with innovation in their organization and want to try and figure out how to build the kind of culture that innovation requires, I've got a couple of copies so we can sort you out with them after. Just come and seek me out and we'll sort you out with a few copies. When you write a book as an author, it's a massive undertaking. If anyone out there has written any kind of, even long white papers and research papers, you'll all know the amount of time and energy that goes in to writing a book. This was about a year in the making. And as an author, you don't write something like that and invest that amount of time and energy and mental capacity into doing something if you don't genuinely believe in what you're writing and what the impact of that is. I committed to the publishers to write the book because I genuinely believe that if you and your organizations really understand innovation as a core capability, and you understand the mechanics about how to put it and embed it as a capability into the heart of your organizations, every organization in this room can become truly exceptional. And that's the foundation that I want to share with you today. But I want to give you something a little bit more pragmatic and a bit more practical. So today, really, I'm primarily talking to any of you out there that are in a leadership role. So you heard from Claire on the panel earlier about about stewardship, and about leaders really needing to own the kind of culture that your organizations need, I want to share with you some tips and some frameworks for how you can put innovation at the center of your organizations as leaders. But I want to start with this. We've heard a huge amount about AI over the past few days. And AI is important. We have to embrace AI. But we have to embrace AI in the right way and at the right pace for our organizations. What I see in the corporate world, more so outside the social housing sector with the clients that I've got around the world in different sectors from banking to pharma, I see this. In the race to jump on the AI bandwagon and make our organizations incredibly efficient through AI, I see many organizations losing what it means to be human. In the race to automate and to analyze data and to embed AI in the center of organizations, we're somehow losing touch with the core component of what we do as leaders when we lead organizations. How do we lead our people, and how do we solve problems for people? And AI is an enabler of that, but it shouldn't be the panacea that we think is going to solve all of our problems. One, if any of you are making notes, I mean, feel free to take pictures, make notes. But if I skip forward and you've frantically tried to write something and you haven't captured it, I'll share some details later. I'll more than willing to send you a PDF of the slides. So don't worry if you haven't captured everything. Just request the slides off me at a later date. The reality is, hope isn't a strategy. So we can't do nothing and expect that we'll shape the future and change the course of our organizations and be able to influence and change our customers' lives. And innovation is the core capability, the core driver of being able to do that. As we know, that's why we're all here. The challenge is 84% of CEOs and senior executives say innovation is critical to driving their organizations forward over the next 3 to 5 years. But only 6% of CEOs and senior execs are happy with their company's current performance and ability to drive innovation. So as leaders, our challenge is, how do we close that gap? How do we close that delta? And that's what I'm going to share with you today. Slightly controversial, and this may offend a few people, but the honest truth about innovation is we cannot self-profess that we're innovative. It's very, very easy to add innovation into our strategies, add innovation, the word innovation onto the strap lines of our organizations, pepper our corporate brochures with the word innovation. The reality is, innovation is about outcomes and it's about impact. And if we want to be genuinely innovative, think about positioning innovation in this way. What if innovation was a badge that could only be bestowed upon us by our customers? That changes the very nature of how we approach innovation and whether we deem things are innovative or not. Innovation should be about making an impact and genuinely shifting the needle for our organizations and, more importantly, for our customers. And when we can evidence that, and when we can show the impact, and when our customers return back to us and comment that we are really impacting their lives, that we are genuinely innovative, then we deserve to wear the badge. The reality is, if customers never ever use the word innovation, who cares? As long as we have the effect that we're trying to achieve, as long as we deliver the outcomes that we want, as long as we deliver the impact that we want, it doesn't matter whether people label that innovative or not. The outcome is changing lives and making impact. So if we scale AI back and the search for AI back in our organizations and take it back to a really, really simple principle, which is this. Instead of asking what or who AI can replace, instead of asking if we use AI to do this process, or if we put AI as a technology into this department, how much of our headcount does that reduce? We can use AI to do that, but I'd rather, as leaders, I'd rather you ask this question. Instead of asking what or who can AI replace, ask what time can AI give back to our people? Who can it give time back? And what can we enable them to do with that time? That is part of the answer to the brittleness paradox that I started with. When we're really, really stretched, we don't have time for innovation. We don't have time to go out and proactively try and solve systemic problems in our organizations that for many of you are costing hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. If you're a 10 or 15,000, 20,000 home organization, things like no access, compensation, stock condition surveys and meeting quotas, all of these things and many, many more, these are problems across the whole sector that are costing individual organizations hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds every year. Now imagine if we could free up time and give that time back to people, spin up small teams and charge them with going out and solving those problems. And imagine if they could even make a dent in some of those problems, we can return hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds back onto the bottom line of our organizations. And as we heard before, the more money we get in, the more lives we can impact, the more houses we can build, the more houses we can repair and maintain. Using innovation to drive bottom line growth, not top line growth like the private sector, but to drive bottom line growth, puts money back in your pockets as leaders to be able to drive your organizations forward. So I want to share something that I think many organizations miss when you look at innovation, and you can tell me after whether this resonates. Innovation predominantly is a scale. And all of you will know the language incremental innovation or continuous improvement. You will have all heard that term. And whether you know it or not, this is happening in every one of your organizations every day, day in, day out. Whether you have a formal process for it, whether there's a formal way to make it visible and celebrate it and reward it, it's happening in your organizations every day. Typically, it's around efficiency. As an employee, I spot something and I think, I've got an idea of just changing the way we do that, and I can make it a little bit quicker or a little bit simpler or a little bit cheaper. Typically, incremental innovation or continuous improvement is about efficiency. More often than not, it's internal. Tiny, small, little ideas. Very low cost, very low risk across the organization. What you might hear of is the most famous version or example of continuous improvement is Toyota and their approach that they call Kaizen. What tiny thing can we do to improve our organization today? What tiny thing can individual engineers and mechanics and assembly line workers do to improve a tiny element of what they do on a day-to-day basis? Tiny, tiny, small tweaks and changes and bits of increasing efficiency, but cumulatively shift the organization forward, but in a small way. The challenge is continuous improvement isn't going to get you from brittleness to breakthrough. It's not going to really shift your organizations forward, but you have to do it. It's what I call the price of entry. If you run an organization as complex and as big as many of your organizations, you have to continuously be improving every day. The challenge with the language around innovation is then that organizations, whether it's social housing or banks or pharma companies or manufacturing companies, organizations then hear from innovation gurus at Harvard and experts around the world that you must disrupt or die. You must be much more forward-thinking and progressive and transformational and radical. And if you look at the scale of innovation, Many CEOs and many senior teams say, well, Cris, we're doing innovation. We've got loads and loads of ideas that are happening all over the organization all the time. But it's not getting us anywhere. So what we read and what we hear is we must be more transformative. We must think bigger. The reality is that level of innovation is out of reach for the majority of organizations on the planet. Being really radical or transformational is typically very, very strategic. It's big. It requires your organization to massively change. Typically, innovation at this end of the scale is very, very high in cost, very high in risk, but very strategic. So the reality is it's only done by half a dozen people at the very top of the organization. And the frequency of ideas and solutions and innovation at this level is really small. You may in your organizations do something that's really, really transformational that you label quite radical or breakthrough or transformative. You might do something at that level once every several years, maybe once a decade. So again, that's not going to shift the needle for your organizations on a continuous basis. But many of the organizations I go to are stuck between, well, we're doing innovation, we've got loads of this stuff happening over here. The radical stuff's just not for us. That's not for the housing sector. We can't do anything on that kind of scale. What do we do? Here's an example of really, really far out, way out there, transformative, radical, disruptive innovation at the right-hand side of that scale. This is a 30 billion dirham, which is about 6 billion pounds, exploration into what a city could look like if Mercedes designed it. So this is being built in Dubai at the moment. This is Mercedes saying, we're going to take out the principles of design and aesthetics and human centricity and everything we know about experience, and we're going to redesign what a city looks like, what living looks like, what community looks like, what open space looks like, what collaboration looks like. Now, you guys can't do that. You might have views like we heard from Claire earlier, 10, 15, 20, 25-year views about where you want to go in the sector. This is way, way beyond. But what you can do is take principles from examples like this to say, how can we start to look at community and friendship and collaboration and cohesion and what living could look like in the future? But what I want you to think about as leaders is, what can we do now that drives our organizations forward? And it's something that in the book we coined the phrase differentiated innovation, predominantly aimed at the private sector, but we can use language for your sector that makes it relevant and contextual. And differentiated innovation is, how do we do things that are big enough in scale, but not too big that they're too high risk and too costly and too unachievable? How can we do things that are big enough in scale that if we solve them will genuinely shift our organization forward, will genuinely shift the needle? And I've got a brilliant example of what differentiated innovation looks like. This is Michelle Gass. She joined Levi's in 2020. So she became the CEO in 2020. At the time, Levi's was on its knees. No innovation, very, very few new product launches. And given Levi's was an iconic 170-year-old brand, the brand was at risk of becoming irrelevant, of being, out innovated by competitors. And one of the reasons was she'd walked in to, and Claire highlighted this earlier on in the panel, psychological safety. What Michelle walked into was a culture of fear, of everything was focused on efficiency, everything was focused on margin, everything was focused on risk mitigation, and everything was focused on do not do anything different other than what we want you to do as the leadership team. And hence innovation stalled. So she had two options. She could either say, I need to turn this organization around. We have to start making money. We have to do more. You as the leadership team need to push harder. I need more from you. I'm going to change targets. We're going to be more aggressive. That increases brittleness in reality and increases people's unwillingness to take risk. Or she said, I've got another option. I'm going to create something called permission to play. And permission to play is exactly what differentiated innovation is about. Find problems that are going to shift the needle for this organization, and I will remove all of the constraints that currently stop you going out there and trying to solve them. Get out there and do stuff in 90 days. Not 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. We get rid of bureaucracy. We put innovation as a core capability at the center of the organization, and we put the right kind of governance in place so that you can move fast, you can try new things, and you can fail as long as we then learn something from it. And the more things we try and the more things we fail, because innovation's a numbers game, eventually the more things we'll succeed at. And within 12 to 18 months, she turned Levi's around. That is right in the middle of incremental or radical or disruptive or transformational innovation. For me, this is where you guys have got to play. Problems here that are costing you hundreds, maybe thousands of pounds. Opportunities here like completely redesigning your target operating model or adoption of a completely new type of technology or system that will transform how you work. Millions of pounds of investment. In the middle, how do we go out and solve customer problems and internal problems that for many of you are costing hundreds of thousands of pounds a year? Take no access as a classic. For many organizations, it's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds a year for some of the larger organizations. How do you spin teams up to go out and solve that problem? And even if you can't completely solve it, if you can put a dent in a £500,000 problem, that's cash right on the bottom line of the organization that you can do more good with. My advice, figure out how you can build innovation capability in this middle ground. And your next challenge as leaders is then, what culture do we need to be able to do that? Yeah, thank you. So how do you use innovation to do AI to do deeper innovation work? Shift from brittleness and running at 100%, become more efficient with AI, but instead of saying we can now reduce headcount or we can reduce how many employees we need, what about keeping those people and deploying them against solving problems that cost your organization money? What you need to do as leaders in order to do that is bring the humanity and the human-centric nature of what your organizations are about, bring that right back to the heart of how you lead. Our job as leaders is to build cultures and build environments where we can play really effectively in that middle ground. Hundreds of things on the left-hand side every year, maybe one thing on the right-hand side every several years, maybe once a decade. Dozens of things in the middle that are costing you hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's the kind of ratio. But you've got to bring back and turn the dial up on the things that AI can't do, like judgment and context and curiosity and empathy and courage and trust. These are the things that you have to put right at the heart of your organizations to build the kind of culture where psychological safety, like Claire mentioned earlier, is right at the heart of how you lead and the culture that your people get to operate in. That's when you build an environment where people will challenge, they will take risk, and they will help you solve systemic, high-risk, high-value problems. To do that, you need to build innovation as a system, as a capability in an organization. Like every other department, whether you have finance, whether you've got logistics, whether you've got customer service, whether you've got legal, whether you've got HR, you need to approach innovation in the same way. You've got to formalize your approach to innovation. You don't necessarily need a department and a team, but you have to treat innovation like every other corporate capability. You've got to measure it. You've got to train people. You've got to have people to lead it. You've got to have metrics. You have to measure it. So you need a system that has a strategy or that's linked to strategy. You need the right processes. You need the right management approach and governance. You absolutely have to have leadership at the center, and you have to build the right culture so that innovation becomes part of what you do on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to leave you as leaders with one final thing. And again, that panel earlier was just the most beautiful segue to this last part, because everything about innovation starts with leaders. It starts with the CEO and it starts with the senior team. I walk into boardrooms where innovation has been decided by the executive team and the board as a core strategic pillar. If that is true in your organization, if innovation is something significant enough for you to say, we have to build innovation capability and put it at the heart of our organization, you need to embrace these three words. What are you going to take ownership of? Claire earlier used the word stewardship. It's the same thing. If we want to build innovation capability and a culture of innovation, as a leader and as a leadership team, what are we going to own? How are we going to put the right things in place? How are we going to make sure we have a psychologically safe culture? Not how are we going to require psychological safety and then hope that it happens. We need to take ownership of building the kind of cultures that innovation requires. And when we do that, we then enable the middle of our organization, the middle managers, to drive innovation and bring it alive on a day-to-day basis. And that enables the rest of our organization to be able to contribute to innovation on a day-to-day basis. There's loads of more insight into this that I can share with you, and we can go really, really deep on this if anyone's interested in terms of frameworks and models and what that looks like. But I just want to leave you with one final thing. You've all heard before the 7 most dangerous words in business. That's how we do things around here, or we've always done it that way. What I want to encourage you as leaders to do is to figure out how innovation becomes a core capability and a core part of your culture, so that instead of those words being, that's how we do things around here, or we've always done it that way, you build a culture that says, I think there's a better way. Thank you, everyone.
Krishna, I put 2 questions.
Yes.
To question you. Pick one from your previous talk around, because it comes up a lot in the middle.
Yeah.
People, it's our middle manager that caused the issues around this. You're rare in terms of actually you say it. You've got that's the wrong way to look at it. Could you expand on that a bit, please?
So if as a leader, if as part of an exec team or as a CEO, if you are looking at your middle management and saying, well, performance has slowed down, we're not getting what we need out of the organization, we seemingly can't do what we need to do as an organization, and it seems to be blocked in the middle. My first reaction is, if the middle of your organization is frozen, where's the cold north wind blowing from? Because in my experience, the majority of middle layers in organizations aren't frozen. Middle managers and team leaders and heads of don't wake up in the morning and on their way to work go, do you know what, I'm going to freeze myself today. They're typically frozen by the system that they're being asked to work in, by what they're being asked to put out and deliver on a day-to-day basis. And where the frozen middle typically rears its head is where an organization also says, but we need more performance, we need creativity, we need innovation, we need new solutions, we need more. Those middle managers aren't frozen because they want to be. They're frozen because they're having to operate inside a system that you as the senior team and the CEO have built and have constructed and want them to play inside of, but you're also asking for other stuff. And the system that those middle managers are having to operate in doesn't allow them to do the stuff that you want.
Okay, thanks for Papa. We've got a rough microphone. Has anybody got any questions for Chris about any things that he's covered there?
I think I've got off lightly.
I think you have got off lightly. I mean, look, you're not going to get to chat to a corporate innovator that's done a local business. Chris has to be called. Are you rushing straight off? Are you? No? Okay, well, look, I mean, we've got a 15-minute break now, so feel free to scan the QR code. We'll cash Chris and ask any questions you've got. We thank Cris Beswick for his time. Thank you.
If you want the slides, just DM me on LinkedIn or something, and we'll get a PDF sent to you. Have the conversation in your organizations with the slides and see what comes up. Thank you, guys.